Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us at Jumpstart's latest State of AI webinar. I am Thailand Nash Howard, and I serve as Jumpstart's media coordinator of the Verizon Learning Centers. With the landscape of AI in such a rapidly evolving state, these quarterly sessions are focused on the highlights and headlines of AI, what you need to know in about 30 to 40 minutes, and how to successfully and ethically apply these tools to your business today. Jumpstart offers another webinar series on different topics every month, along with a variety of other educational programs and events. You can visit jumpstartinc.org/smallbiz to explore our other services. Before I introduce our presenter today, a few housekeeping items. This presentation is a mere 30 to 40 minutes. The remaining time will be set aside for the Q&A portion, with an end time of 12:30. In your toolbar, you should be able to see an important communication tool at your disposal today, the Q&A. You can put your questions in the Q&A as they occur to you, and Brad will address them when appropriate or at the end. At the end of today's session, in a follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback as it allows us to continue to bring in experts to teach you these valuable lessons. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our esteemed expert, Bradley Reynolds. Bradley is a recognized leader in the AI industry with a deep understanding of the transformative power of large language models, or LLMs, and generative AI. As the Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence at Expedient, Bradley spearheads efforts to simplify the deployment of private AI for enterprises. Once again, you're in good hands. Welcome back, Brad.
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate it. Yeah, so it's been a minute since we did one of these, and kind of going to go through the stuff that's top of mind in the last 6 months. My role here at Expedient, I'm Chief Strategy Officer, but I'm also building the kind of AI product. So I have some visibility into kind of what medium-sized enterprises are doing, but I'm going to try and talk about more of the general lay of the land and give you some guidance there. And then happy to answer questions both at the end, but if there's something pressing that's in line, I'm fine kind of answering it during the actual presentation. So to me, one of the biggest evolutions in AI now is that a lot of my initial research and kind of ideation I've outsourced. So this is an example of me using OpenAI's deep research to come up with the draft of the deck of stuff that we're going to talk about later. So you can see what the prompt is that I have. I use the deep research model, giving it the general guidance of what I wanted to cover. And then additionally, it asked me some questions back about, who's going to be on the call and, what do I want to focus on in industries. I give it that information and then away it goes. And I would say that the stuff that's coming out of deep research, so using OpenAI, GPT-5 Pro, the best stuff. I have the $200 a month OpenAI account, but you can also do it in the $20 a month account. The stuff that's coming out, I'm finding gets me 80 to maybe 90% of the way there, and then I kind of edit it down after that. But being able to come up with a presentation of this kind of size was kind of not really possible a year ago. The kind of quality of output has increased substantially, and you'll see kind of the results of it here. But before I go into the presentation, I have just a couple of touches on other things that might be interesting or valuable. So this is I looked at the previous presentations that I did, and I had this little slide where I was showing what's on my hotbar for my phone, or whatever you call the home screen main bar. And the top one was about a year ago, the second one was 6 months ago, and the bottom one is today. Please ignore the 3,000 emails that I haven't answered, but maybe AI will get to them someday. But to me, it's a visual representation of how AI has just evolved in terms of my own personal use. So obviously on the left side is OpenAI, which I use extensively for lots of different kind of tasks and topics. The second one is our own AI engine at Expedient. So because it's our product, I tend to use that one a lot. The next one's Gemini and Perplexity in a box. And then all of the other stuff that used to be the most important, which is email and phone calls and text messages, Teams messages, Slack. They're important, but kind of they're the least important of the kind of tool set that I have. So I found it humorous to see how it's evolved and how my own thinking, even though I was kind of grasping that AI had a lot of impact, it hadn't really made it into my day-to-day or minute-to-minute thought process. Whereas now it's pretty much whatever the task is. I think AI first. I mean, my wife and my kids absolutely hate it, but now they've become converts. So just like, and I think ChatGPT actually was mentioned on our Christmas card last year. So thought that was cool. And here's a little shout out to a couple experts in Cleveland. So Paul Reitzer and Mike Kaput, they put together a weekly podcast called the Artificial Intelligence Show. So if nothing else resonates with you out of this entire presentation, I would highly recommend, if you're interested in AI, and especially learning about the implications of AI in the kind of broader macroeconomic sense, but also to you, your company, your job, the future of work and employment. Paul and Mike are phenomenal at covering that. Paul is a trained journalist, but also a phenomenal speaker. He runs the Marketing AI Institute out of Cleveland. And I listen to tons of podcasts. I'm kind of a technical person, so I listen to all the podcasts about what's going on with models and the technical details. And I listen to Hard Fork and all these other things. This is the number one AI podcast of anything that I've listened to. And it's not just because I'm friends with Paul, it's because he can take complex topics and turn it into a story that allows you to understand and kind of get your bearings on where AI is going. So the link on the right is to the podcast, and I'm going to be sending out, or Jumpstart's going to be sending out a version of this presentation so that you can kind of go and hit the QR code there later. Additionally, because we're going to touch on this a little bit later, Paul and Mike and the Smarter X team, and Smarter X is the umbrella organization on top of this podcast and the Marketing Institute. They're going to be launching something in the middle of August. I think it's like the 19th, and it's called the AI Academy. And what this is like a privatized, like a very bespoke, personalized learning journey. So think about it like almost like a college for AI that any individual or company and sets of individuals in the company can employ to kind of upskill their workforce in a way that like resonates with each individual. So I'm super excited. I've heard about what's coming, have not experienced it, but one of the core topics with AI is as job displacement happens, what do I do to get ahead of it? And I think education and learning is going to be a core component of it. But like even at our organization, we're like, hey, what do we use to educate our 500 employees? Nothing really exists out there now. And so Paul and Mike and the team have put together this AI Academy, which promises to be a learning journey that individuals and companies can employ. I'm not employed by AI Academy or any of these guys. I'm not an advisor to them. I just know that the educational component of AI is a huge hole that we have right now. And helping folks develop personal literacy with AI is it's just a giant problem to tackle and solve. And I'm super excited that it's being solved by these folks. And I'm also really excited that they're in Cleveland. So to me, I think one of the premier AI learning organizations is about to launch in a week or so. And I'm very excited to be able to see what they're doing and, kind of how I can participate also to learn as well. So it's just a shout out to those guys, but definitely if you like podcasts, it is the preeminent AI podcast because it helps me think better. And it helps me understand what's going on in the world. And it's in a format where they cover a couple of main topics, say 3 main topics, and then maybe 10 kind of lightning topics. So you get kind of a broad coverage of what's the news of the week in a very digestible and kind of bite-sized format. So with that, we'll kind of go into some of the macro trends that are going on now. This is based on research that's out there, but the kind of, probably everybody understands that there's a big opportunity in terms of the growth of AI, but like how big is the opportunity? And the kind of GDP boost of $15.7 trillion by 2030 is a gigantic kind of sea change of how companies and economies are going to grow, and that AI capabilities are doubling and tripling yearly. But I would say even on the technology side, maybe seems like they're going up by 10x year over year. In Ohio, we're capitalizing on some of this. We have a very interesting spot because we live in a state that has relatively cheap energy, and it's also not subject to many natural disasters. So what you're seeing now, and if you follow maybe Ohio X or some of the other Ohio resources about why people are moving to Ohio, there's a huge boom, especially in the Columbus market, of like data centers and essentially the underpinnings and foundries of where AI is built and trained and also deployed at scale so that folks can consume it. So that when you're using ChatGPT, the actual servers and systems are sitting somewhere like in the future will be Ohio. And the company I work for is actually a data center company. We don't really play in AI infrastructure at scale. But my CEO told me that Columbus is now the fifth biggest data center market in the United States. And so I think that there's a lot of positives that are, I'm sorry, the number one new data center market in the United States, and currently the fifth in total deployment. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on inside of Ohio in terms of the impact that we're going to be able to see from AI and all the jobs that are kind of created around it. The other part is kind of the ubiquity of AI's adoption in companies. So I'm primarily focused on what businesses are using AI for, not so much individuals. But the McKinsey had some pretty good studies that came out in the last month or two talking about what's the prevalence of AI out there. So this isn't the first kind of stat isn't so much around which companies have 10 employees using AI. It's more around which companies are kind of broadly adopting it. So what we found is that in 2024, lots and lots of companies were talking about AI. Everybody realized, hey, there's this potential out there. But at least in our business, selling an AI product, we weren't getting a lot of folks actually purchasing. We were getting a lot of kind of free consulting and educating of the market. I don't know what happened in January of 2025, but it was like a switch flipped where the amount of sales and kind of folks engaging with us and the folks signing contracts just absolutely exploded. So we went from very little adoption and lots of talk to a lot of adoption and still a lot of talk. So just because your company is using AI broadly, which, to McKinsey's point, might be at 33% of them, doesn't mean that they're actually getting ROI out of it. And so that becomes maybe a second step. The other part is that the kind of discussion has permeated and sometimes dominated the board level. So if you think about a board of directors of a company, they usually don't spend time talking about technologies. They're talking about where are sales at for your company and what is the strategy. But AI has kind of vertically seeped into the boardroom where it's now a key topic of conversation. So like, for instance, at our last board meeting, I mean, AI kind of dominated about a third of it in, talking about the product and all of that, what are the market trends. But for most organizations, AI is seen not so much as a technology, but a way to unlock business outcomes. And so that gets the attention of the board level because it now becomes the transformational lever to be able to, kind of grow effectively. And thanks, Lauren, for posting the podcast. And then additionally, kind of as at the bottom part of the fast deployment, so there's a lot of solutions that you can go out and buy Copilot or go out and buy ChatGPT Enterprise and deploy it quickly. So we're finding that folks are buying and deploying. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the value is being extracted from AI. This is kind of still very an early phase in terms of adoption where we're purchasing, implementing, but we still need to figure out where the value is going to be from the adoption. So the question is where are we seeing on the business side, AI delivering a lot of value right now? So certainly in marketing and sales departments. So from a marketing side, definitely in terms of all the copy creation and all the creative content. Again, just like this presentation, you're not going to take the output of AI and put it onto your website, but it's to the point now where instead of it being 50% right and having a bunch of hallucinations, with the fact that we now have AI that goes out and references the web and PDFs and internal company data, the quality of output that we're getting from just the general purpose foundational models is probably 90% there, maybe 95% there. So that what the humans need to do is like a small amount of kind of copywriting, editing at the end and deploying. On the sales side, what we're finding with AI is that it is taking sales processes and making them more deployable at scale. So the processes of what do I need to do when I'm planning a call with company X with these 3 people on the phone call? Well, if you have their LinkedIn URLs and you know the company's URL, you can feed that into deep research or similar tools and say, hey, give me a plan of attack for these folks, or upload the previous call transcripts of the conversations you've had with that company and help me develop a plan of attack for how to best sell on the call. Secondarily, after the call, let's take the transcript of that call and all the information we have about that person, and let's have AI tell us, or at least give us initial guidance of what we can do to respond to keep pushing the ball down the path. On the kind of customer service side, this was an early adoption for AI where people are saying, hey, a lot of the stuff we do in customer service is very systematic, but we have a lot of humans deployed to do it. Can we use AI to start solving problems? So we actually see this as being one of the prime drivers of AI adoption in an enterprise. Why is that? Because it's easy to measure. So if you say, hey, we have 1,000 customer support calls that we get per day, and we can answer now 300 of them with AI, and not only answer them, but answer them to a level that the clients are happy with. So it's not so much to put put AI on it just for an efficiency gain. But if you're creating a negative customer support issue by using AI, obviously you don't want to put it in there. You leave with the humans. So it's getting to the point now, and for instance, our company has clients that are using 30 to 50%, and it's kind of like a Turing test where if you can't realize that it's AI that you're interacting with, so this is both from a chat perspective, which seems a little more understandable, but also from a voice perspective, which is more difficult. If you don't understand that you're talking to an AI and you're getting your problem resolved, does it really matter from your perspective that it's AI? So definitely a driver there. And then another part is just in using it for internal efficiencies. So code generation is definitely a big piece out here. So it, like any type of programming department, or even if you've heard the term vibe coding, which means somebody who isn't a computer programmer can take an idea that they have and talk to AI and specify it, and out the other end becomes working or close to working code that could be deployed, say, by a professional programmer. Tons of utilization is going on there. In fact, I can't remember if it was Replit or Cursor, but these are 2 kind of coding assistant companies. One of them is the fastest growing company, venture-backed startup, to get to 100 million in revenue. And the valuations of these companies, like for Cursor, they're doing about 100 million in revenue. Their value is $9.9 billion. That's 90x top line revenue. They're not making a profit, but just huge valuations out there. So that kind of tells you what the market thinks is the opportunity for coding and assistance there. Additionally, on the HR side, this is a relatively small use case, but one that's relatively easy to implement. Whereas having your HR function, so a lot of it towards the end of the year is talking about the new health plan or any changes and comparing that against potentially your spouses, and should you switch or should you do that, or even simple questions like, do we have Memorial Day off? Those all can now be AI front-ended by having an HR agent that's capable of answering those questions. Well, how is it capable of answering those questions accurately? You upload the entire HR document store for things that general employees need. And so instead of having a Teams message or a phone call to the HR department to answer the same question, 50 different times, hey, let's just let an AI agent do it. So small ROI, small use case, but something that's relatively easy to implement is where we're seeing kind of AI delivering value now. So there's some interesting things going on in Cleveland in terms of AI. So on the manufacturing side, it's a bread and butter of our particular area. So we're starting to see people experimenting with AI in terms of business process automation, but also kind of vision recognition, kind of more assembly lines or hard manufacturing issues. I think that there's a huge upside for Cleveland in terms of how can, when we talk about maybe some of the agentic stuff later, how can having AI assisted workflows take business processes, especially in manufacturing plants that have been built over the course of 30 or 50 years, and start to let AI make decisions in very controlled and bite-sized ways so that they can start to kind of jump the gap into an AI driven and AI first organization or an AI forward organization. Additionally, there's a lot of leadership being taken in the healthcare area. So we have obviously one of the best health systems, but also health innovation systems in the country, if not the world. And the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals both have different systems and setups to start employing AI at scale. Like the clinic has, I think, a whole center around AI, and they're doing lots of experiments with how they bring that into the patient journey. And they've definitely shown a willingness to invest and scale and also take those kind of maybe uncomfortable steps of implementing AI in patient forward areas. So I think that they will drive AI adoption in healthcare as kind of leaders of what's going on. And then we certainly have some very big regulated finance companies. So whether I would consider insurance one of those, and Progressive also is one of those companies that is adopting AI at scale. Now, Progressive has been using machine learning and artificial intelligence for many, many years in terms of their underwriting how do they underwrite claims and stuff like that. But I'm talking more of the generative AI side of implementing chatbots and customer service agents to be able to execute their business processes at scale, as is KeyBank. So we have some of the luminaries in Cleveland really taking, I would say, transformative steps. And so, definitely things to pay attention to. But one of the key topics on, I think, everybody's mind, and this is also, as I mentioned, that podcast that Lauren put the link into, that Paul does. This is a heavy topic that he covers almost every week, and he'll probably explain it way better than myself. But the elephant in the room is, okay, great. We're talking about AI and all of these efficiencies, and it's answering customer support questions, and it's doing these automations at manufacturing. Well, what does that mean for the workforce and individuals? I mean, it's going to mean material displacement. And if you're not thinking about it as an employee or a manager, I guarantee your CEO and CFO are having deep discussions about it. Now, having been a business owner and built a bunch of businesses, the concept of, hey, we're just going to use AI to cut a whole bunch of expenses out of the business and that'll be the steady state. I don't think that's actually going to be how it evolves. That may be the short-term implication of the implementation of AI, but the longer term is, let's just take the stuff that's the routine things that our business does and many other businesses do, have AI deal with that. And let's focus that investment money, like that savings, on adding more people to grow the core of what our business is. The problem is that that doesn't necessarily happen, within 1 month of each other. So right now we're seeing a lot of drive towards efficiency. And the hope is that that capital that will be generated from efficiency will be redeployed into new jobs and roles that help kind of grow companies at scale. We'll see how that happens. So, like an example would be in programming. We talked about the efficiency gains that there are in programming. So, if you have a computer programmer who has an AI agent set tool through like Replit or one of those, are they able to be 3 or 4 times as efficient? Yeah, they can be right now, especially if they're a senior level. The problem um, is the company over time going to, as they scale, add those 3 programmers back for the efficiency? And I don't know if there will be the same number of roles created in the future for an organization as there would be today without the kind of advent of AI. So that's a to be seen. But you can read the kind of stats here in terms of the transformation and the automation and augmentation. But this is definitely a big topic. And so to talk back to kind of what Paul's doing with AI Academy, to me, the concept now is, okay, I need to be the master of AI. How do I become an indispensable person that really understands how AI gets used in my job role? And how do I become the best at that? Because I think, and this is me just pontificating, but my thought is that everybody's going to end up being a manager, and you're going to be managing different kind of AI agents and AI capabilities in terms of executing your job function. That's interesting. It seems like the trend is going that way. But the difficulty is if anybody's is a manager or has been a manager, whether you're managing people or agents or a combination of agents and people, it's very difficult to manage. And the interesting thing is with some of the behavior of AI agents, they have a lot of similarities to people as opposed to machines in that they're hard to predict and hard to necessarily pin down. So that's kind of some stuff that's going on there. Bill Gates has his opinions about what's going to be in 10 years job roles or capabilities, and if his thought is that we can replace doctors and teachers with AI, I mean, like kind of like what roles are remaining for the humans. And I'm generally optimistic that new roles will evolve, but as to what those roles are, I'm not exactly sure. I just know, hey, I personally in my job want to be in control of how AI is being implemented and operated because I know that the humans that know how to use AI at scale are going to be indispensable in the future. And my thought is that people will continue to want to grow companies. Companies will need to be a combination of humans and AI. So in terms of some of the stats about kind of job loss and creation, um, you can read the stats, but one of the questions that I ask myself is, what's the impact on age bands? So if you think about kids graduating from college right now, are those roles that AI is going to be replaced? Because generally you're coming into a company with entry level skills, you're learning how to do business and what it means to exist inside of a business. You're usually not tasked with making the executive level strategic decisions for a business. You have some relatively mundane stuff, and you're using that to kind of learn and get acclimated to a company. Do we lose some of that? Do we lose middle management? So you have executives and kind of line workers, but middle management gets kind of shifted to the side. I don't know what the piece is there, but I definitely am paying attention to and I'm concerned of what are the opportunities for folks graduating from college right now. Additionally, not only what are the opportunities, but what have colleges and the pedagogy of collegiate education train them for? Is the workforce or the work needs of a company like ours the same thing that the computer science program at Case is training their people for? I think it's starting to wildly diverge. For when we're hiring, we just hired a few developers. We're looking for people who know how to use AI tool sets at scale. We don't necessarily care about the phenomenally deep level of knowledge in any one area because our assumption is that AI is going to have a bunch of that. We just need to kind of check on top of it. And so I don't know if the colleges are preparing folks for that, but they're certainly aware of it. It's just they're large institutions that don't turn on a dime. And so how do we square the pedagogy of colleges with the kind of needs of the entry level of the workforce? A lot of people are working at that. I think, in fact, Bowling Green in the last 6 months has released a degree program where they have, and I think it's you get your degree, but your degree also has AI on top of it. So it's like a co-degree. I thought it was pretty interesting that BGSU was leading some of the innovation there, and I know Case is doing some of that stuff too. But something definitely to pay attention to because I feel that there will be a lot of displacement before kind of the clutch engages and the car starts moving forward in terms of the uptick of new jobs and roles being created and companies scaling out. Something to be prepared of, and how do you as an individual deal with it? You have to become the master of AI. How do you do that? You educate yourself. You use it on a day-to-day basis. Um, it's a little case study about Adidas. They use coding assistants extensively in terms of building, work product. So my question about this use case is, I get all of these stats in terms of their use. They have 500 engineers. They use AI coding assistants and agents. They're shipping code. But the question, me being a programmer at the base, is what's the quality of what they're getting out of it? Or essentially, what's the return of investment? Are they maybe creating more work than they're actually solving? So it's very easy to generate mountains and mountains and mountains of output with AI, but are you getting the quality that you want out of it? So the use case here is merely that a relatively large company is using AI and AI agent coding assistants at scale. The question mark that we'd all ask ourselves about the use case is, are they getting the value? Are they getting significantly more efficiency? We could say they're getting significantly more code generated per person, but does that actually turn into the product that they're trying to ship? So that's a question mark I think we all ask ourselves about AI. Some super basic best practices for AI adoption is, you know, crawl, walk, run, start small, deal with this constantly with clients that they see the potential of the moonshot of AI and how it's going to revolutionize their business. And so they want to tackle the hardest problems first. Really what you want to tackle is the smallest problems first that have some measurable return on investment, where it's improved moving tickets from an unrouted queue to a working queue, or something very simple, but using AI to make that decision. So start small, kind of iterate from there. Another best practice, kind of adopting AI in a business or the enterprise, is the kind of coal that fuels the engine of AI. So AI is a kind of a thinking and deciding or compute process. You need to give it information to make decisions on. Just like when we make business decisions on a day-to-day basis, we're going off of the stuff people send us in email and the documents and historical data and the tickets and whatever we need to make the decision. That good information needs to be fed in, and AI itself doesn't know how to filter. So if you send it 80 pieces of information, they're all equally valid. But if you send a human 80 pieces of information, you can relatively quickly assess what of those 80 pieces is likely to be the ones that you want to make the decision off of. And so the kind of data readiness and cleaning the data and getting it in a format that AI can make a decision off of is a big project. And so when people are like, I want to use AI with my company's data, the thought there is still a crawl, walk, run. It's like, look at the spots where the data is very curated and cleansed, and say like, okay, this is a gold standard. Let's start with those and not start with the places where it's extremely messy, because you're likely to get a messy outcome from it. And then the last is, how do you limit the blast radius for potential erroneous decisions or conclusions that AI makes? Just keep a human in the loop. So if you said, hey, I want to use AI to solve some of my customer support issues, well, do you really want AI to solve it, or do you want AI to suggest to a human who then kind of completes it? Do you want AI to take the ball to the, into the red zone to the 20-yard line so the human could take it in from there? That's usually kind of the prudent way to deal with it now, likely to be prudent for, the relatively near term. Another piece in terms of best practices is, choosing the right tools and, trying to go with more reputable AI platforms. So AI kind of growing fast, there's tons and tons of different companies out there. So how do you kind of assess which ones are the ones that are going to be there for the long haul? You certainly, can bet on the Microsofts and the Googles. Like, they're going to be there for the long haul, although their individual tooling may not be perfect right now. They're generally a good long-term bet as you're looking, what's going to happen in 5 years with my company. And then, test and iterate, just basic kind of business practice, and then educate. So that's why I'm particularly excited about what Paul and the crew is doing with the AI Academy. Is, we want to educate our workforce, but it's very difficult for an individual company, even us, that we have an AI product, to say, hey, not only do we have an AI product, we're also master educators about AI. So investing in those types of capabilities so that you can give almost like a gym membership to each of your employees, or even buying one for yourself, is kind of a key way to figure out how to adopt kind of AI at this point. So just it's a strategy, not a technology, and it's a transformative thing. And then also looking at, in your particular industry or business, if you're thinking about your processes and your 30-year-old businesses in a certain way, the reality is there can be somebody out there, or many people out there, who are just looking at, hey, I'm going to start something up in a competitive area, and I'm going to use kind of AI from the onset. What am I going to attack? And just using that kind of 360-degree view of your business to say, hey, if I was a competitor and I was just starting up, what would I be using AI to attack? Somebody likely will do that if it's relatively low hanging fruit. So instead of allowing a competitor to do it, just look inside and think of how do I entrepreneur that, or how do I kind of incubate that inside of my own business, and all of that. So how do you use it kind of day to day, regardless of the company? So the big piece for me over the last year has been, maybe 2 years, is I know there's potential there, but it takes a while to reset patterns. And I think as you get older, it just gets harder and harder to reset them. But I was still going to Google for the last year or something. It's like I don't use Google or any of the web really anymore. I just use AI. I'm at the point where I'm thinking AI first. And like I said, it's that my wife and kids laugh at me. It's like I go that way, but it really can do the front loading for a significant amount of tasks. So I've used it in a lot of different areas, but brainstorming, boosting productivity. I love using it for research. Like, hey, take the product set of Expedient and kind of look at what the market trends are. What's the CAGR of all our different product lines? Can we sustain the top line growth that we want? All that stuff, and having AI chew on that and come back with a research report that you would have had to pay 50 grand to an analyst to do, and frankly wouldn't have been as good. So I use it ton there. And then custom GPT. So this is something that's part of ChatGPT, but the notion of creating this relatively lightweight agent that you feed or seed with a bunch of data and thought processes so that it can be like a co-CEO or a marketing expert. So making it like an agent that you can consult when you have questions. And so essentially you're building a custom GPT, which is just giving it English language specifications that you can then create almost like as a product for your company to be like, hey, this is a marketing expert. It knows all the details about our brand guidelines. It can write a blog post. You can make things like that. So those are little tiny experiments that could be done just to assist you in your day to day. So you think of the roles that you do or the hats that you wear, and creating custom GPTs for those hats is a nice way to unlock capability. And now you have this kind of little agent that you built that you can consult when you want to do things in those areas. And this is just an example of when, something that I use deep research for over the summer. So we took a holiday up in Maine, never been to Maine, don't know anything about Maine. And we were in a city, and then we were going to go do a backpacking thing after that. But we had 2 days to spend, and we didn't have any plans. So just told it, what's our family like? We like donuts. We like to eat. We like to, X, Y, and Z. And then it came back with some questions. So this is deep research through OpenAI. I answer those questions, and then it gives us a full itinerary. And we probably used 80% of it, and it resulted in a really fun, 2 days of vacation, and kind of helped us like lily pad between little towns in Maine, and had just a wonderful time. That research would have taken me like days. And it would have been one of those things where you start it, you kind of get it half finished, and you get distracted by something else, and you come back to it. But I was able to type that very basic prompt, answer the couple of questions that it came back with, and then it came out with something that we were able to go have a lot of enjoyment out of. So it's personal life, but I kind of don't really separate the use of AI from personal life and work life. I just look at problems to solve, and it seems to be the hammer that's fitting all of the nails right now. So, some tools and platforms to try, ChatGPT and all its tool set around it. And actually, while Google was not known as a phenomenal AI company in terms of like the quality, everything was open AI, it's actually ascendant, and many would say that it's superior in terms of its output now to OpenAI. So I use those both for deep research as well as general usage outside of like our own internal company tool. There's a lot there, a lot to uncover, especially with OpenAI and the ability to create custom GPTs and a lot of the other capabilities. Gemini has awesome things like video creation with the VO3 and all of that type of stuff. Interestingly, a lot of folks have come up with, hey, well, maybe, if I'm doing AI writing, there's all these writing assistants, but like the problem is like the AI chat tools are starting to become so good that there's almost starting to be like no reason to use any separate tools. So that's why I put Formally in there. And then if you happen to be like a coder or somebody in a technical discipline, GitHub Copilot, Cursor, Replit, especially Cursor and Replit, they absolutely are force multipliers for your ability to ship code. Doesn't mean you can just take them and ship it into production. You still need humans in the loop there. But the change that's happened in the last year, let alone 6 months, is absolutely stupendous. So that happens to be an area of expertise. Or you want to vibe code and you have ideas and you want to get code output so that you can say, I'll develop the spec because I'm not able to communicate effectively with our technical people, but like I have this idea in my head and I want to get it 80% of the way there for them so that they can take the ball and score the touchdown with it. It's there now. And it's pretty cool to see a lot of people that are outside of the coding capability to be able to generate code that can then be implemented at scale. Just a couple small business use cases. There's a startup called Digits that can cut bookkeeping costs by 90%. It's an AI-driven thing. And then a couple other little SMBs. So just accelerating onboarding of new employees, or a health system or a small health clinic using AI to communicate with patients. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to change the world. You just need to find little small problems to fix, and AI is capable of doing that at this point. In the last couple of minutes, I'll cover some of the stuff around some of the newer things that are happening. So one of the big trends right now is the rise of agentic AI or agents or autonomous AI. There's a lot of terms out there about it, but essentially it's, can I use AI to make autonomous decisions in my business or personal life? And for the past couple of years, kind of the accuracy and capability of AI wasn't really there, where you'd be like, I trust it to solve trouble tickets, or I trust it to do this, that, or the other thing. But it's now at the point where it can make decisions at par or in advance of a human in a lot of areas that have previously been only the domain of humans. So the Auto GPT and Baby AGI stuff from a couple of years ago, they kind of had a lot of buzz and hype, and then the balloon kind of popped. They just weren't able to deliver on the value. But the reality is it's now there. And it's not necessarily there in terms of, hey, I'm going to have agent customer service that can completely handle all of the customer service kind of solving, but more of like, hey, I'm going to take a workflow inside of my business and I'm going to let AI make decisions at certain points in that workflow, so that the blast radius of what AI is if it makes a mistake is prepared to do is kind of limited to just a relatively small localized area of a workflow. So there's just a lot going on here, and it's actually real. Like enterprises are implementing this stuff at scale now, but it's still agent stuff, and AI assisted workflows are very early innings. But the concept is, if you have a business best practice, you're now able to kind of automate that at scale and letting AI start to make decisions along the way. Humans can still be in the loop. You can have a process that, AI does 10% of it, some of it's deterministic, and then a human kind of validates it, which seems to be the way that most folks are doing it. But it's here to stay, and it's actually kind of the future of where everything is going. And to kind of put it in a box, the ideal situation would be you would be interacting with an AI agent the same way you would be interacting with a controller at your company. So the agent itself would be an entity for all intents and purposes, and it would have access to tools, so like capabilities as well as data. So tools meaning like, hey, I know how to update the general ledger. Data being like, I have access to all the previous financial models. And so those kind of aggregation is aggregated together in this entity called an agent. And then I could talk to it just like I talk to a human controller and say, hey, could you run a pro forma on this market for the next 3 years based on these variables, and then should be able to execute that and bring it back. So that's kind of it's not there yet, but that's the way that kind of all that stuff is moving. So give a couple takeaways, and I have some time to answer some questions. So it's here to stay. It's not a technology, it's a strategy. And so invest in it like it's a primary strategy for your business in terms of both unlocking efficiencies, but hopefully unlocking the ability to grow over time. And that by no means would I advocate that AI is a replacement for 95% of the workforce. The reality is there'll be an adjustment that happens where it might be able to do 30 to 50% of the tasks that go on inside of a business, but the combination of people and AI is very important. And so by people and AI, there's this maybe concept out there, and you hear like the doom and gloom stories from the Microsoft where, hey, we're going to cut all of these kind of jobs and capabilities. The reality is that AI first, meaning put AI first above humans, I don't think this is going to be the right strategy for businesses. It's more of an AI forward. So the notion that AI and humans are going to be coupled together, and humans are the folks that have built the business. So how do you make things work for both together, as opposed to just saying, hey, we're going to end up moving everything to AI and kind of pushing the people out to the side. I don't think that's going to be the steady state. And if you take that tack, you're probably going to be alienating the culture and emotion of your business. So probably not the ideal spot. So AI and per people, or people and AI, seems to be the hybrid winning combination. And then starting small, make sure that you lead with a vision about how this is going to be integrated. And then also with ethics, in terms of understanding that, how ethics is involved in the situation, as well as sensitivity back to the people aspect, where it's like, hey, just because this thing's powerful and exciting, be aware that the long-term steady state is going to be a combination of humans and AI. And if you alienate the people in your business by pushing AI so hard without any consideration for their implications and their training and what the roles in the future are going to be for them, you're essentially setting yourself up for a disaster, which is not, easily avoided as long as you keep people first, and AI is a tool to kind of assist them. So I think that is and then the last slide, which is whatever AI that we're using today, which is phenomenally impressive and helped do probably 80% of this presentation. This is by far the worst we're going to ever use. And, I'm super excited for kind of where things are going to go from here. So with that, happy to answer any questions. Okay. Oh, I see Patrick has his hand raised.
Patrick, I just unmuted you. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Or if you want, you can type it into the chat if the unmute's not working too well.
Patrick, we can come back to you. You can put it, like Brad said, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Anyone else have a question? You can raise your hand and I will unmute you. All your burning AI questions. Brad, it seems like you covered everything they needed to know about AI,
Well,
which is typical.
that's highly unlikely, but thank you.
It looks like we do have a couple questions.
Okay,
Oh, great.
cool.
Thanks, Tylen.
Does AI have a strategic RFP that business owners can use to request proposals from consultants?
Yeah, let me see where is that question, because I'm not seeing it.
It's in the Q&A.
Is it different from webinar chat? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, sorry. I see it. Let me just read it. Have a strategic RFP to request proposals for I mean, I guess if the question is how do we develop an RFP that we can use to request proposals from consultants, I would say my first start would be with deep research and say, here's the general format of the proposal that I want, create an RFP for me, and kind of see what it comes out with. And of something like substantial like an RFP, you can also maybe find general examples on the internet of RFP formats, upload that to deep research in addition to asking it, and just give us some examples and come up with like the format. But with an RFP, I'd probably use both OpenAI and Gemini and have it use deep research on both, see kind of what they come up with, and kind of merge some of that stuff together. So if the thought is how do I come up with a great RFP that business owners can use to request for proposal, that would be the way that I'd go about doing that. And if that's wrong, just throw in another question and I'll try and answer it better. And Deb, okay, so I see the questions now. Deb says, when I use a cloud-based AI service and upload company data with my prompts, am I implicitly giving the AI service provider right to use my data for further training purposes of the model? Great question. Huge question, both from a personal perspective, but especially a business perspective. So the key here, and it'll vary by vendor, so I'll only talk about OpenAI, which I know is the free version of OpenAI. You are implicitly giving permission for them to use it. That's what your value exchange is in terms of getting it free. With the paid version, there is a flag in there that says, like, allow OpenAI to use my data for training purposes, which I've seen is off by default if you're in the paid version. But I've also seen people complain that, like, when the paid version got upgraded to a new model, somehow that thing got clicked on. So I've never experienced that, but I've heard people say, well, something changed and then suddenly that flag got enabled. So that's more of just a diligence that if you're using one of those tools, there is a setting that says they're allowed to train on it that should be off. And if you do an update, just kind of validate whether that setting is off or not, because generally you don't want them to be able to have your data to train off of. But yeah, there's a legal spec and agreement on that. So Michael asked a question: is there a use case for coding contractors to take on vibe coding projects to bring them to the finish line? And is there a gateway for this? Yeah, I mean, that's actually super interesting. I think that's probably, I think that could be like a great business case, where you go to companies and be like, hey, I know that you're using Copilot or whatever to vibe code, but I'm a professional programmer. I can essentially be your eyes and ears to make sure that everything fits if you don't have employees that are already doing. So I think that's a great idea. And I'll draw a little parallel into the legal realm. So there's a variety of legal companies or law firms, for all intents and purposes, that are launching, that are kind of very much launching from the prospect of, we're going to use AI natively kind of across our firm. And maybe we're going to focus on trusts and estates, wills and that type of stuff that's relatively formulaic. And then we're going to have a senior partner take whatever AI is generated and turn it into the final product. So it's almost the same thing in the coding side, where you take an expert who is able to kind of work with the vibe code or AI generated code and turn that into kind of professional level code that could, be committed or has the right kind of, I don't know, semantic capability or something like that. So yeah, I think there is a business model there. And I guess you just got to hang a shingle and start talking to people, or even you could potentially do it on the side, 10 hours a week. But I definitely think there's something there, because not only is it from the quality of the output, like, hey, we can't trust vibe coding stuff to get deployed in production, but secondarily, it's just the security that a business would feel like, hey, I have a professional taking a look at this information and making sure that it's validated before I go and ship it or commit it. So I think that one's a definite opportunity for employment. There's the shingle. No, but it's cool. The other thing is, people sometimes go to places like Fiverr and all those places to do it. So you can hang the shingle out there, because I guarantee people are going to get wrapped around the axle with vibe coding, and they're going to need help. But I love the vibe coding thing because it gets it from somebody's brain to something that's relatively actionable. It's just not a finished product. And so how do you do that? And you get like a good domain or so. I guess you have it. The TA Tech. I love it. That's a great idea, and I love all entrepreneurs. So I think, do we have any other questions?
Looks like we have a couple some
Oh,
questions. For
yes.
non-technical users, where do you suggest they begin?
Um, yeah, so I don't I would say probably I would start with like Paul's podcast, because he is not technical, nor is Mike. and they're good about giving you the context of what's going on and where you should go for resources. So I don't know how many episodes they've done, but let's call it 100. There's a lot in there, and I think like 1 hour vignettes. Start pawing through some of those, and they'll start showing you resources. There's also a podcast called Hard Fork that's super interesting. So I'd probably do that because it's relatively easy to listen to, and you don't have to listen to it for an hour. You can listen to it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and get some value about kind of where to go. And certainly with podcasts, you can look at what were the topic areas that they covered, and that's where I would probably go there. The podcast, Kim, is probably it's in the webinar chat. It's called the Artificial Intelligence Show. So yeah, that one's there. And then Kim says, how can I learn to build agentic AI models? So right now it's relatively nascent, so early. I know Microsoft has an agent system. I forget what it's called, but essentially call it like a playground where you can build an agent. But I'd say probably maybe even the first one is to experiment with a custom GPT on OpenAI. I think you have to be a paid user at $20 a month. But think of a custom GPT as just like a super lightweight agent. Doesn't have access to everything, doesn't have all the tooling that a full agent would have. But essentially, you're creating a little entity that might be an expert at generating a blog post or something like that. So if you have hey, there's this job function that I do all the time. How about I create an agent that allows me to do it? So I can talk to that agent like a human and say, hey, I'd like to create a blog post about this and this and this, and use this type of research out there. And then what you would do for creating the custom GPT is a very verbose instruction set in English, potentially with lots of examples, but you would spend a bunch of time creating maybe call it like a 20-page document of examples, and here's how you think, and here's the kind of format of how you would make a blog post, and here's the kind of edcal that you want, or whatever the things are that you want to specify. That will show you how to start building the instruction set for an agent. And then you can kind of go to maybe some of the Microsoft tools after that, which is kind of like a sandbox to experiment with building these AI agents. But I just want to note that the agent itself isn't a model. It's a collection of resources. So it's an instruction set that you give it, a bunch of data that you plug it into, and tools that it has access to go and execute things. It uses a tool, could be a model that it uses underneath it, but the actual agent itself kind of exists above the fray, and kind of just, it's essentially like what you think about an employee. You educate an employee and give it capabilities and access to an email account, and then you kind of talk to it, like a human. So very fun to play with, and a lot more will be coming out in the next 6 months. Deb asked the question, I think this is probably the last one that we can do. What are the AI tools that are used to detect AI generated reports similar to plagiarism detecting software? Extremely difficult. This is a problem that they're basically, the AI is so good, it's very hard to detect AI. And so it mostly to me is, I know it's qualitative, but if somebody generates a 70-page report for me, I know it's probably not a human, because no human's gonna write that length. And also when you read it through, if there's things that don't seem kind of consistent, it misses a few things. So I find that it reads like an 80% finished product. So the actual grammar of it wouldn't be detectable necessarily as AI, but the actual logical connections that it makes, like the way a human would be yeah, that's off, or it swapped this company's name with that company. And then you're oh, that's probably was a machine that did it. I don't know of any AI detecting software that's extremely accurate. Most of them tend to generate more false positives than it generates the actual AI detection. So that's a relatively difficult problem I don't know has been solved. AI Academy. So I would go relative to AI Academy. I'm not an expert on it, but let me put in a URL. AI Academy SmarterX. So I'm going to put in a URL to, this is the company that Paul and Mike have. It's called smarterx.ai. And there's a link, like if you go to that webpage about, they're going to do like a launch event on the 19th for the AI Academy. They have a version of the Academy now, but it's very, I think, oriented towards marketers. Whereas the Academy that they're launching in a week or so is oriented to everyone at a business. I mean, also on a personal basis, but it's definitely focused on, helping employees become smarter about it. So my recommendation would be attend the launch event. And I think on the last podcast Paul did, so maybe this Monday's podcast, they talk about it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes of detail at the beginning of it. So I'm going to be at the launch event. I'm excited to see what happens. And, I'm super stoked that maybe Cleveland is going to be the home for one of the leading AI educational concerns in the United States. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, but that's how I'm going to learn about it too. And then, I think that's it. So thanks everyone. Appreciate the attendance. Love the questions. And we look forward to the next one. And we'll send out the digest of the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Brad, and thank you everyone for coming. We don't have any more State of AI webinar scheduled at the moment, but maybe we can convince Brad to do another one. Our next general business webinar is called The Franchise Model and will be held on Wednesday the 20th at noon. So we hope to see you there virtually. Thank you all again, and thank you, Brad, for coming. I hope you all have a wonderful week.
Okay, thanks.